So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews, on an episode of After the Credits on End Credit Reviews. This is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Steven, once again, from Stephen Lawson Studios.
Yes, and because a new Pacific Rim movie is coming out now about giant monsters, I decided to make a top 10 giant monster movies of all time list. Now, what exactly are the rules for it? Well, for one, I'm just gonna pick the best of a series so it's not clustered with a bunch of other monster movies from a certain series, although there will be ties in this list. Second of that, what exactly is a giant monster? Well, anything that can pretty much crush a car, so nothing like the Creature from the Black Lagoon or the Frankenstein monster, which they're big, but they're not that big. And also nothing like, the Iron Giant, because that's not a monster. And also something like Jaws and Jurassic Park don't count because they're just kind of too much based in real monsters in reality.
Like animals, yeah, instead.
Yeah. So anyway, I know that Steven hasn't really heard or seen most of the movies on this list, so I'll just try to use these images to try to make him help him visualize.
I may have seen some of them, or at least snippets, but to be fair, I think I'm most familiar with Godzilla, King Kong, Cloverfield.
You'll see.
Things like that in the giant monster genre. Pacific Rim, which we just reviewed. So.
Yeah, several of those movies you just mentioned are definitely high on the list, so it's mild spoiler, folks. Alright, so at number 10 is It Came From Beneath the Sea. In this movie, a giant squid or octopus, whatever you want to call it, attacks various places and, ships, and especially San Francisco, and of course the Golden Gate Bridge would probably start the whole, trend of the Golden Gate Bridge being attacked in something. And there's so many of them, I'm surprised no one has made some kind of conspiracy theory video on it yet. But anyway, the special effects for this movie were done by, or actually visual effects, whatever you want to call them, and let's call it the effects in this movie, were done by Ray Harryhausen. This guy is a legend when it comes to stop motion visual effects. And this is the giant squid in the movie, and I feel like these scenes are pretty interesting. However, I do feel like the movie suffers from overuse of narration to the point where it's not needed or necessary. It's pretty boring.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have not seen this one in particular. I think I may have seen a snippet. I definitely wouldn't put it high on the list. So, again, I'm probably not the best to commentate on this particular example. But, yeah.
Moving on?
Definitely.
Okay. Alright, so at number 9 is Eight-Legged Freaks. Now, I know that some of you are scoffing at me you put this movie on here? Well, I recently rewatched this movie. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, and it's a movie that is goofy, but purposely goofy. It's a movie that's self-aware and kind of a parody and a spoof of the giant monster movies in general in that. Even the, spiders in the film, which I know they're kind of Sci-Fi Channel original movie kind of effects and such. And there's a part where there's a scene where they're chasing these biker guys, and he does a jump thing and kicks the spider in midair while it's leaping. Still more plausible than the Fast and Furious movies.
True.
But yeah, I mean, the spiders kind of act goofy and make weird sounds the gremlins. Right. And on top of that, I'm not even kidding, we have a young Scarlett Johansson in this movie getting webbed by one of the spiders.
Way-o.
In her bathrobe.
Way-o.
So what do you think?
Yeah, this one I've actually seen snippets from. I haven't seen the whole thing, but this is a goofy, fun one. I definitely say it's slightly better than the Squid one, but I mean, for the time, you have to consider too, and that being the case, I mean, the Squid was probably more effort than this one was today overall. So, but yeah, I mean, I can see where that would be warranted for that spot. So
okay. So at number 8 is a tie between 20 Million Miles to Earth and 20,000 Fathoms Under the Sea, is what the title was, and they're both effects by Ray Harryhausen, and also both have the word, the number 20 in the title. And that's so 20 Million Miles to Earth is about pretty much this, group of scientists or astronauts, whatever you want to call them, these astronauts and they come back to from Venus with this alien life form, and it grows due to Earth's atmosphere, and this monster eventually rampages in Italy, mainly in Rome, and it's as big as an elephant. In fact, it fights an elephant at one point. And it also has this impressive visual stuff where it's attacking this one guy, and the other guy gets a shovel and hits it and bounces off of it. But there's this really chintzy effect shot where he grabs some creature who's like the size of like a toy, and when he's grabbing it, it's like at one part like you can tell it's a toy. It's like you couldn't just put it in a bag and save time and money on that.
Yeah.
And then also 20,000 Fathoms Under the Sea is about this, the scientists do like nuclear testing in the Arctic, I guess, and the nuclear bomb erupts, but pretty much frees this dinosaur or monster dinosaur, whatever you want to call it, from its icy prison and attacks various places, including New York City at the end.
The Ice Age!
Yeah, really, and I guess that was the whole story behind Don't Break the Ice. that board game, if everyone remembers. I mean, they're both interesting and entertaining, but I just do feel like, besides their iconic images and creature designs, I feel like they are kind of just kind of films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got you there, and I feel you. These examples that you're providing, I can't help but feel that they look very similar to the original Clash of the Titans film. Do you remember the Kraken in that?
Yeah, by the way, hint, hint, later on.
Did I ruin something? I ruined
Kinda.
it. Soiled it!
And Beast from 20,000 Fathoms had its moments as well in that. So at number 7 on the list is another tie on this list between the original and the 1980s remake of The Blob. Now they're both iconic movies, of course, especially the original with Steve McQueen. And I guess if you look at The Blob in the original, it's kind of like a glob of jelly in a way, but it's gradually like eats other individuals.
So it's Kirby.
Yeah, it just gradually like eats people, and what makes it kind of scary in a way. And also, the kid's trying to tell everyone in town. It's like a 27-year-old guy who's like a teenager trying to warn people in town, but no one believes him. I mean, there's some hokey effects near the end and such, but the movie itself, I do like it because of its iconic, classic kind of stuff. But also the remake of The Blob was actually like, wow, I'm really impressed with all the effects they were able to do, and it was a movie that was made 30 years ago. And also it was pretty graphic in its violence, was how the people were killed in the film.
Good.
In fact, there were characters in the movie that I wasn't expecting that they would die, but they did die.
Wow.
And also developed it more. Instead of it being a monster from space, it was actually like a scientist like the government created, and they were trying to cover it up. And there was a kind of a parody spoof sequel, and I watched the film and I'm like, this is laughably bad. I think they purposely did that. I don't know if Mystery Science Theater 3000 has done this yet, but they desperately need to do Beware of the Blob, or aka it's called Son of Blob.
Yeah, I'm not so sure anymore if Mystery Science Theater should, because it's run by new people now. But the original cast, they still do something. Like I think Riff Tracks is their new thing. They definitely should if they haven't. But yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of that definitely seems to be a better one, and pretty graphic in terms of imagery, which is good. So
all right, so at number, what number am I?
I think this is 6. Yeah,
something like that. Okay, is the movie Them. The movie Them is a 1950s movie about pretty much some nuclear tests that are done in the desert, and there's these giant ants that are created, and these ants are pretty much brought to life by animatronics, and the movie actually is better now than when I watched it as a kid, because I feel like the sound effects and the ants were like really stand out, and the action is actually not half bad either. And also the part with the little girl being traumatized and being snapped out of it, and she yells like the title of the movie. It kind of reminds me of the remake of Godzilla, where that one guy is scared and the guy lights the lighter and that. So what do you think about this one?
Very true. Yeah, it looks solid from the animatronics. This is one I haven't seen, but yeah, the animatronics for it look pretty plausible. So I bet it's warranted.
All right. So at number 5, now number 5 to number 1 you probably heard of in that, and Steven kind of spoiled it earlier. and that is Clash of the Titans. And no, not that awful one with Sam Worthless Worthington. I'm talking about the 1980s one, of course. And I watched it rewatched it recently. Yeah, some of the effects are a little bit dated with some obvious blue screen effects, and the guy who's playing Perseus in the movie is kind of overacting a bit at times. But again, the visuals in this movie are really impressive. It's a really fun kind of Greek mythology story. I'm kind of a sucker for not just that, but also kind of the swords and sandal kind of genre movies. But also the Kraken character, which is like really cool looking and kind of like, Yamer. And this was like the Harryhausen movie effects that he did. And also it's a PG movie, but there's boobs in the film. I'm not even kidding. There's a part where Perseus' mom is breastfeeding him, and later we get some side boob from Andromeda, which is like, wow, this is PG?
Lord have mercy.
Awesome!
Was that before the
PG-13?
I was going to say the PG-13 rating.
Yeah, there was surprise in that. And also the scene with Medusa where they're trying not to look at her, and it's a pretty tense scene where it's really dark, I gotta say.
See, and that makes it doubly difficult because you can't look at her face, and so you look down, but you can't look at her breasts either. Whoa!
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Spill.com jokingly said, like, man, if I was Perseus, I would be so bad because I wouldn't be looking at her face. Just like zap, like, my eyes are up here.
You think you got a gaze. Look at this!
Oh, yeah. Yep. All right, so at number 4, it would have to be Cloverfield. Cloverfield is a movie. Now, what makes it stand out from other giant monster films is that, for one, it's a found footage movie, and second is that it shows perspective of the bystanders trying to run away from the monster. Usually you focus on like the military or the scientists. This one does something completely different, and the design of the Cloverfield monster, known as Clover, is not only really cool and unique in its design, but also it's really revealed in a great way where it's teased throughout, and we get a great satisfying reveal.
Excuse me. Yeah, I overall absolutely agree. I'm curious what the other three will be because that may determine where I arrange the excuse me, the last few. But Cloverfield is probably overall, with the exception of King Kong, the Percy Jackson, or excuse me,
Peter Jackson.
Wow,
Percy Jackson.
No, that's what I get for all these damn advertisements. But Peter Jackson, slap. The Peter Jackson King Kong, that and Cloverfield, I think, are probably my overall top 2 favorite giant monster movies. The monsters themselves may be a bit of a different story, but those 2 films, I think, overall are outstanding in their own right at redefining the giant monster genre. So,
okay. So at number 3 is Pacific Rim. Now again, we said earlier in our review on Pacific Rim is that what makes this movie stand out is that they develop the characters a lot more and the story a lot more than typical giant monster movies, but also has a A-list budget, and the monsters look so unique and awesome, and there's a ton of great action in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Again, we just recently did a review of this, and it's very warranted. That is a overall great, fantastic for the genre especially, but an overall fun and great film about monsters and robots beating the crap out of each other. So that's definitely warranted. And as Tyler said, the character development is overall stronger, especially for Western audiences, in the case of Pacific Rim. So,
all right. So at number 2 is a tie between the original and the 2005 remake of King Kong. Now these movies are such classics in their own right. They're so fun and definitely great escapism movies, I gotta say. Now the one thing I will say the original is better than the remake is that it's better paced at 1 hour and 40-something minutes, while the other one is over 3 hours long. However, the remake is better than the original in the category of character development, especially Ann Darrow's character, who was played by Naomi Watts in that film, and I actually felt more sorry for King Kong in the remake than I did the original, but the effects are really impressive. In the original, stop motion by Willis O'Brien, and also in the remake it was done by Weta, who did the Lord of the Rings effects, and of course Andy Serkis playing King Kong.
Yeah, again, that's that may overall be that and Cloverfield my two favorites of the giant monster genre, because they were done so well, and this definitely warrants it. This was another example. It's very long to some people, and some people just clock out because of the long opening act, and I've forgotten the length. Isn't it like 3.5 or 4 hours?
Maybe 3.5.
I got you. But in any case, I can understand where some people that puts them off, but it's worth it if you wait.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something this generation really needs to take into account.
Yeah, that's one of the many reasons why I didn't care much for Kong Skull Island.
Right.
And even worse, the 70s remake with Jeff Bridges.
Very true. But this one is definitely warranted, and you really feel for the beast by the end. So, very, very good pick.
Okay. Alright, so for my number one pick is that of Gojira, aka Godzilla from 1954, the original from Japan. Now I know it's a guy in a rubber suit, but the thing is that just look at this movie. It's a movie that takes itself really seriously. Just look at all the destruction, all the low-angle shots of Godzilla just destroying Tokyo, and just see how terrified they are and how realistic they take this sort of event. In a way, I mean, Godzilla is kind of a monster representation of how the Japanese people saw the nuclear bomb, because they experienced two of them firsthand about 10 years prior to this movie. And it's so like gritty and dark with all the death. And there's one part where all these little girls in this like school are like singing, and it really does tug at your heartstrings in that. And also I gotta say that it's probably my favorite foreign film next to Metropolis from the 20s. And also, as my thoughts on the remakes, I think the 90s remake with Matthew Broderick has its moments. It did introduce me to giant monster movies and Godzilla, so I'll give it that credit.
Sure.
It's not the worst Godzilla movie, folks, okay? You haven't seen Godzilla's Revenge or Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, okay? And also the 2014 remake is like, okay, it was kind of better, but they kind of teased Godzilla way too much, and yeah, you could have had more screen time.
I got you. Yeah. I definitely can see. I was thinking it was probably the number one was going to be Godzilla because we hadn't heard the name, but yeah, I personally, well, I'll make this clear. To me, there's a difference between what are the best monsters versus what is the best giant monster movie. And I feel like in the case of Godzilla, or Gojira being the original, I personally don't feel it's the best of the genre in terms of filmmaking, but he is clearly the equivalent of Superman to the superhero genre. He is the founder, he is the bedrock, he is the monster when you think of giant monster right off the bat. Then usually comes King Kong and other things. But Gojira is that giant monster. And so I really agree. Like, if this is explicitly for giant monsters in film, definitely. I would probably restructure the last four a little bit if we're referring to the films as a whole, with probably Gojira being, I don't know, maybe third or fourth. But in terms of the actual monster itself and what it means in pop culture or just culture in general, definitely. Godzilla is clearly the figure that has withstood the test of time. So,
yeah, definitely. If this was Cinemassacre, they would put the giant claw at number one. Maybe it was a runner-up. All right. So this is Tyler from Angry Critter Reviews.
And Stephen from Stephen Lawson Studios.
And we hope you enjoyed this episode of After the Credits on Angry Critter Reviews. And we hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe.